your neighbor. And by local, you should think that near is better than far, small than big, and simple than complex. And down in the footnotes at 5-point type, also that personal is better than corporate and that physical is better than abstract. We're brought to you by yournews.com, yournews.com, and also the Nuganomics platform, Nuganomics being the website for the man who matters, not for everybody, right? And therefore, it's not popular and never will be. But if you want to know how the deep state operates in Tennessee, you go to Nuganomics.com and you subscribe. You subscribe to the Nuganomics platform, and maybe share in my my presupposition, my prejudice, if you will, that local is better than international, and that we should really think about making amends and making reforms here in Chattanooga. One of my proposals is that we self-consciously make Chattanooga a sanctuary city from abuses of Title 55, which is the transportation code, used by police and sheriff's deputies, used by Sheriff Jim Hammond as against just the other day, as against a very innocent and harmless man, a Hispanic man named Rudy Soto Rodriguez, who lives on 7602 Lee Crest Lane, an innocent man who's being prosecuted for traveling. He's exercising the right to travel, and he's being prosecuted by an abusive use of the law. And let's see if Neil Pinkston takes notice of the law that I have been kind enough and gracious enough as a reporter and journalist to give him a copy of. I've given him a copy of the law. This is David Toulis, and we have on the phone a young woman named Tracy Arnold. She and her husband, Bill, who is in the computer field, have 6 children, and they live in McNairy County, and there's been a brouhaha over Tracy. Tracy, tell my listener what the conflict is with you and the police officer back in May 29 of last year. You were arrested and charged. What was the charge, and what was your defense?
Well, my defense is that for the license is a tax receipt for the privileged use of the roads, which is using the roads as your occupation, business, vocation, etc. And the registration plate constitutes a privileged tax, which is a tax on the business, occupation, vocation, or the like. And he wants to say that I'm, operating a motor vehicle, when in fact I do not operate a motor vehicle. As a motor vehicle is an instrumentality of commerce. As one, it requires the privilege tax, and all over you'll see that a privilege is revoked, or a privilege is revocable, and that a privilege is for-profit activity affecting a public interest, and that's the United States Supreme Court and law encyclopedias such as Corpus Juris Secundum, Corpus Juris, and Black's Law. I do read a lot of that as well.
You're a homeschool mom who has a very diverse and unusual interest, and the charges against you were misdemeanors, and they were dismissed because the arresting officer was not in the court, and the judge taxed the cost to the state for its prosecution, and now you're readying a lawsuit to try to get back your van, your passenger van, stolen by the city of Crump, Tennessee, and McNairy County. You live in Adamsville. And you're trying to get your van back. It was taken from you without due process. You are prepared to claim. Now, let me ask about minorities in Tennessee. And the reason this is important for my listener is, as he's coming to understand, Tracy Arnold, that poor people often are abused by the police industrial complex, the judicial industrial complex, under Title 55, which is a statute book you've read pretty carefully. And so what we have here is you are representing the larger group of poor people in Tennessee who are simply abused by arresting power by officers and deputies, and they're charged with revoked, suspended, expired or none, you were in the none category, not having a driver's license.
Especially when Xi Jinping did what recently?
And
Xi Jinping made himself pick.
And so you are acting, you might say, representatively. How is it that the state abuses the poor and the immigrant and the African American by this process? Because you have shared in their plight.
Well, I would say that the abuse is that they're not proving for-profit activity affecting a public interest, and that they've pretty much resurrected the Dred Scott decision, saying that everybody has to, wear their badge in incident of slavery for the peace and safety of the state. I would say that the abuse is also in the public school system for not teaching us civics, not teaching us what a privilege truly is, and not giving us the legal education that the people need. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, but they don't train us. If you're interested in law, or if you want to know your rights, you actually have to go out and seek, diligently. And I've been studying this for 4 years, and it's been very, very hard. It would have been a lot easier if the public school system taught me what my rights were, or taught me what a privilege was, or taught me what interstate and intrastate commerce was.
But schools don't do that. Schooling never touches on rights. It never touches on the main output of the General Assembly, which is laws, and those laws are in many, many volumes in the Tennessee Code annotated. No one ever looks inside those things to know how it is that we are subject to the state, how we are in many ways bound under and bound up in, and I would suggest even oppressed by the modern state. And here, as you're describing it in your case, you were arrested for using the public right of way for a private purpose. Now, on that morning of the 29th of May, you were not being paid, were you, to carry anybody for hire, or were you carrying any goods for hire, Tracy, or any lumber or any supplies like that for profit?
I was absolutely not using the roads as my place of business, and I do not use the roads as my place of business. And also, I'd like to point out that a passenger, here it is. It's 152 U.S. 122. Every man is called a passenger who pays freight, I say freight, for his own person and for goods which are not merchandise. They're wanting to say that, these are passenger motor vehicles. Who's paying freight? I don't accept freight. If you need a ride, I'll let you in and come on. I'll take you where you need to go. Well, not now because they stole my car. But regardless, it's nothing but deception all the way through. These aren't motor vehicles, as motor vehicles are instrumentalities of commerce. They're the big, they're the unusual and extraordinary use of the roads. They are the people who are using the roads constantly. These semi-trucks, they're constantly moving back and forth. And a taxi cab, constantly moving back and forth. And guess what? They're only required to have a Class R or Class D license, and a Class D license, well, this is in Mississippi. I haven't looked at the license categories or classes in Tennessee because I've mainly just been fighting Mississippi pretty consistently, but I have U.S. Supreme Court cases which are used in Tennessee, and I have Tennessee cases as well. But regardless, it's the constant use of the roads in for-profit activity affecting a public interest. Now, I know you argue that if your car is over 26,001 pounds, that you're causing a danger on the roads, and you're using the roads, and you're damaging the roads. But if you're not engaged in a privilege affecting a public interest, you aren't required to have a license plate on that car, because the license plate is a privilege tax, which is a tax on the business, occupation, vocation, or etc. So if I had a big old RV that's over 26,000 pounds, I'm not required to register it. I'm not required to have a license, because it's not for-profit activity affecting a public interest. Now, if they need people to pay a tax on these, well, actually, the gasoline tax, you know, the regular gas is like 18 cents per gallon. The diesel or the big trucks, I believe, is like 23 cents per gallon. The average man pays $100 a year towards the roads. Now, it's also not our fault that they don't build the roads made to last. They build the roads super cheap so that they can hurry up and, they save money. But in the long run, they don't save money because they do a really crappy job. Excuse my language. But anyway, so yeah, it's the constant and unusual use. It's the dump trucks, it's the semi-trucks, it's the taxis, it's the drays, it's the freight. It's all these big trucks, anybody using the roads as their place of business.
This is David Toulis, and we're talking with Tracy Arnold.
Officers.
Go ahead.
Police officers, ambulances, fire trucks. They're using the roads as their place of business. Now, they are serving, and affecting a public interest. Now, they are serving the public, so I'm sure that they would get a break, but they're still required to pay that privilege tax.
And what you're doing, though, Tracy Arnold, and many people who are Hispanics are probably the most free people in Tennessee because many of them don't have licenses, and they are, in fact, exercising a right of travel on the public right-of-way privately. And what they're doing is I have made notice to Neil Pinkston and Sheriff Hammond and the City Council in Chattanooga. What they're doing is they're using the roads for pleasure and for private purposes and private necessaries. And that whole concept of the private reasoning of people like you, Tracy Arnold, is evident in the statute. I mean, the way the statute's written, and also according to administrative notice on transportation here in the Chattanooga area, it is not, as you say, not affecting the public interest. It's not subject to the police power because these are people exercising their God-given rights, major rights and minor rights as well.
Right.
And so there's not. Go ahead.
I'd also like to point out that Gibbons v. Ogden was one of the first, or actually it was the first commercial or commerce clause case, and it's at 22 U.S. 1. And they said, or Chief Justice Marshall said, when no trade is carried on or intended to be carried on under the license, it is clear that the license is a fraud upon the state. So if we are not, involved in any trade, business, occupation, et cetera, then we're actually committing fraud on the state. And I believe that it's constructive fraud for the state to compel us. Now, I could be wrong on that. I haven't been studying fraud completely, but, we know that Congress cannot compel commerce. The state cannot compel commerce. Congress has the power to regulate commerce, but when no commerce is carried on, then there's no license that's required.
What you're saying, Tracy Arnold, is that certain words that we take very familiar as commonplaces, such as the word drive. I mean, drive is used routinely for going in a car from one place to the other. You're kind of giving a warning, it sounds like to me, to avoid using that word, because the word connotes or denotes that the traveling act, the act of getting in the car behind the wheel, putting the foot on the gas pedal, that if that's done in commerce is driving, and that is operating. And yet we're all called drivers and operators of motor vehicles. It sounds like you're proposing a very stringent use of these words, and maybe among Hispanic people, among minorities and immigrants and the poor, avoid admitting in a traffic stop, avoid admitting that you're driving or a driver or that you're an operator, and effectively change the vocabulary to describe the legal action of your use of the road at that point. And that would be, I'm just traveling and I'm not in business, I'm not in commerce. So that would be kind of a defense, you're suggesting, a defense at the traffic stop here in Chattanooga and elsewhere.
I can agree. The early 1900s, Black's Law defined driver as one employed on the roads, and statutorily, a driver is one who operates a motor vehicle, which to me is an admission that the motor vehicle is, in fact, an instrumentality of commerce.
And so my listener, people, for example, such as Rudy Soto Rodriguez, who's facing a criminal charge here in Hamilton County for using his car for private purposes. He should, at the traffic stop, he should not have made any admission, especially if it's recorded, that he was driving, that he was operating. He should say very carefully, well, I don't know about that. I'm really not sure that I'm driving or operating, but I am using my car. This is my car. I'm here for private business. I'm just going to work today, or I'm coming home from picking up a child in daycare, or I'm going to the store. Those are all private activities, not subject to police power. And so he should be very careful and strenuous about using the proper terminology. Tracy Arnold.
I absolutely agree. And a motorist is one who operates a motor vehicle. So I definitely also advise stay away from the word motorist. Stay away from the word motor vehicle, because a motor vehicle is a special class used for the unusual and extraordinary use of the road.
This is
you cannot exercise your right to travel in a motor vehicle.
No, and because most cars and trucks have tags on the back, there is when the cop pulls the traveler over, there is a presumption of jurisdiction. And so what I think that the traveler has to do, even though his car may be registered at some point from car and converted into a motor vehicle, he needs to rebut the rebuttable presumption of commerce. He needs to say, oh, you stopped me because you thought I was under your jurisdiction because I had a plate on the back, the tax payment receipt of the tag or plate on the back under the back bumper. However, officer, I'd like to notify you that I'm a private user. I'm not involved in commerce for hire. I'm not carrying any goods or people for hire. What's your problem and how may I help you? That seems to be the best course of dealing with the officer, Tracy.
That to me, that does sound really good, but in my opinion, there's not a dang thing that you can do. All you can do is argue recording and then make your case with the officer. You're going to go to court. If you're going to exercise your right to travel, you're going to go to court and you're going to fight tooth and nail in these courtrooms. And you're going to have plenty of time to study, plenty of time for paperwork, and plenty of support.
And in the Chattanooga area, if you are hauled into court, you do have one thing I think you, my listeners, should know about, and that is administrative notice. Both city and county have received from me, your host here, David Toulis, at 92.7, a simple review of the statutes and the court cases that make it very clear that you do have a right to travel, and that's something that Black people, African Americans, minorities, the poor, and immigrants who are here traveling freely, and especially another category that we often overlook, Tracy, and that would be orphans and widows, whom God in His Word very clearly protects. He offers them special protection. They can't be harassed, especially by those in authority, for traveling freely and privately in their cars and trucks.
Right.
Well, listen, we're glad that you were able to join us, Tracy Arnold. Anything else you want to mention before I let you go? I see you have children nearby.
The thing I'd want to mention again is that Tennessee Code 58102A and B talk about the privilege tax, which is a tax on the business, vocation, occupation, or the like. And Tennessee Code 554101 says that the registration of a motor vehicle constitutes a privilege tax. So what we're harping on is privilege, and privilege is like here at 191 U.S. 171. Any occupation, business, employment, or the like affecting the public may be classed as a privilege. 170 Tennessee 377. It cannot be denied that the legislator can name any privilege a taxable privilege and tax it by means other than an income tax. But the legislator cannot name something to be a taxable privilege unless it is first a privilege. A privilege is whatever business, pursuit, occupation, or vocation affecting the public interest the legislator chooses to declare and tax as such. And here's 286 U.S. 276. tells us that the Constitution imposes on the states no particular modes of taxation so long as the tax imposed is upon property within the state or privilege. And 94 U.S. 113, and that has already been said to show that when private property is devoted to a public use, it affects the public interest, then it can be taxed as privilege.
Tracy Arnold, thank you so much for joining us. This is David Toulis. We're talking with Tracy Arnold. She is fighting for the right of travel and planning to sue to get her van back from the town of Crump, Tennessee. This is David Toulis, and it is a privilege to serve you. David Toulis.
Nuga Radio.
Do you hear that? That, my friend, is not what you're thinking. That is the new 2018 Indian Chieftain Dark Horse. Yeah, Indian. Indian motorcycle is more than a bike. It's an experience, an American icon. And Indian Motorcycle of Chattanooga is the only place you'll find their new 2018 line. Are you ready to ride? Join the club. Go to Indian